What do you think of when you think of the best shonen anime? Well, most anime fans have their favorites, and a lot of that is really subjective. A very common answer would be something from the big three like One Piece, or maybe something from the newer generations. I'm partial to Chainsaw Man myself. There's also some more niche answers that are also rather successful like Haikyuu. But two series really stand out to me when I think of this question, and those are Fullmetal Alchemist and Hunter x Hunter. Not necessarily because they are the best that shonen has to offer, although they are fantastic. But what makes me want to talk about them is how they are treated and put on this grand pedestal by the anime community as a whole. Anytime a new battle shonen comes out and has a neat power system, someone's gonna come out of the woodwork and talk about how Hunter x Hunter has the best power system of all time. Anytime a series is in its final arc, Fullmetal Alchemist inevitably comes up in conversation for having what most people agree is a phenomenal ending. Honestly, that'd be the case if it just had a good ending though. The bar is pretty low most of the time. Regardless, this is the case for a lot of things, with these two anime sort of held up as this eternal standard for how to write the genre, universally beloved. And today, we're gonna compare them and talk about which one is better. But before I get into that, let me know which one you like more in the comments below. I'd love to see all the different opinions because I do think this is an interesting question. So let's get into it. While I am comparing these two series, it is worth noting that they are so vastly different in almost every way. I could approach this like a typical comparison and break it down. Like I could say, well, I think FMA has a better protagonist in Edward, but I much prefer the cast of villains in Hunter x Hunter. That's really reductive and doesn't actually get to the heart of what makes a story what it is, especially when comparing two stories that have totally different approaches to them. Hunter x Hunter is a battle shonen, but it's also a massive adventure epic with a heavy focus on complex battles, fantastical locations, and a story of ever-increasing scale. And yet, despite the complexity and grandeur of its world, it never fails to tell powerful stories deeply rich in character. The most famous example of that would be the renowned Chimera Ant arc. It starts by going to an entirely new country, with the main antagonist being a completely new species of beings, unique to Hunter x Hunter and anime in general. And it goes very in-depth, exploring both of these aspects of the arc. Some might say a little too much, but I'll get into that later. Yet despite this, the arc is most well known for the fascinating character study of its protagonist Gone Freaks and its main villain Meruem, with Meruem being remembered as one of the greatest villains in all of anime. A rightfully deserved reputation too. Following his journey from a child that could only follow his instincts and birthright to take the top of the food chain to a far more human character with his own unique morals and beliefs is fascinating. And it's only a fraction of what makes that arc good, an even smaller fraction of what makes Hunter x Hunter great. Fullmetal Alchemist is a very different story. It is a battle shonen and has a great sense of its action sequences. It puts a heavy emphasis on its political intrigue, ever-deepening mystery, and very tightly written character drama. In fact, tightly written is basically one of the best ways to describe this story. Aside from some of the initial chapters that the Brotherhood anime skipped over, which introduced the world and some minor characters, Fullmetal Alchemist is really just one complete story. You can't really split it into arcs like Hunter x Hunter or really any other series of this kind. It's just one continuous story. Whereas the scale of Hunter x Hunter gets bigger and bigger, the more we learn about the story and world of Fullmetal Alchemist, the more we realize how interconnected it all is. Alchemy, for example, is not only a power system for fighting, it's also the key part of the premise of the story of Edward and Alphonse trying to reclaim their lost bodies. Their journey begins and ends specifically because of how the power of alchemy works. It's also a fundamental part of Amestris' military power, another very important part of the story since this connects to the state alchemists being used as weapons of war, tying directly to the political corruption of Amestris and its conflict with Ishval. Even characters that have never interacted are connected. Winry is the main heroine of the story, and despite not having interacted with Scar for most of it, we learn later down the line that he is the one who killed her parents. Which isn't something that needed to be the case for the story to work as a whole. But because this is how it's done, the story is able to use both of these characters to tell compelling drama in the same scene. Because they are tied together this way, both of their characters are pushed forward with relative efficiency. And that's what makes this interesting interesting because again, the approaches to storytelling here are so very different. Hunter x Hunter is written by Yoshihiro Togashi, pretty much a legendary mangaka, known for writing 2 hit series in Yu Yu Hakusho and Hunter x Hunter. But Yu Yu Hakusho, unlike Hunter x Hunter, is for most of its story a very typical battle shonen, which is not something you can say about Hunter x Hunter. Like, yes, it is very well written and I can talk about that, but what makes this story so great and renowned is its unbridled creativity. Every new location is unique and interesting. It presents a world that only begs to be explored further. I talked earlier about the chimera ants, but they really are just such a great concept. A species that takes on the features of those they eat isn't just a really unique threat, but also creates so much diversity in that threat. An entire species of antagonists, all with unique looks, powers, and instinctive natures. I think my favorite example of Hunter x Hunter's creativity is Meteor City, a city with no official record of existence and only serves as the world's dumping grounds. A city whose people have formed such a close bond that any attack on its residents is unforgivable. And while they will accept anything that is dumped into their city, they will never allow anything to be taken from them. What a cool idea for a setting. I've never seen anything quite like it in another show. And there's plenty of other places to visit, from Heaven's Arena, a 251-floor tower of pay-per-view combat, to the Black Whale, a giant ship built to effectively house 200,000 people. It's such a big boat that in the center at the top is a lake where another boat is that houses the wealthiest people on the ship. It's just so fun and I adore it. And I would never see that kind of thing in Fullmetal Alchemist. But that's just because that's not the kind of story that FMA is. I've already talked about how efficient the writing is, but that's not really the core of it. Like, look at the 2 power systems, for example. Nen, by design, is limited from person to person, but for the story, it really allows Togashi to come up with whatever wacky power he wants. Conceptually, the limit is arbitrary and is more of a vehicle of his creativity. A lot of power systems are like that actually, it just so happens that Togashi was exceptional at creating one that allows for complex and interesting fights. Alchemy, in contrast, is just very limited from the ground up. There's a few bits of soul manipulation here and there, but it's mostly grounded aside from that. Edward would never be able to do things like Basho's haiku powers or the indoor fish that Crollo briefly uses. But this is also to the series' benefit, because alchemy is designed purely for the story it is in. Fullmetal Alchemist could never be told with another magic system, and that is how this story is designed. Instead of constantly expanding the scale of the story like Hunter x Hunter, it goes further inward. Most of the story is spent in a single country Amestris, and a great deal of the story is spent learning more about it and the conspiracy involved. In Hunter x Hunter, I mentioned how much I love Meteor City, but it's also not nearly as well explored. Not because it's badly written, it's not, but because there is just so much else going on. The story doesn't need to explore it more than it already has. And none of this is to say that Hunter x Hunter doesn't delve into its concepts. Places like York New City are very well defined in the time that we spend there. But one of Arakawa's most admirable qualities as the writer of Fullmetal Alchemist is how much time she spends delving into the fundamental concepts of her story. Also just how immensely well researched they are. All of the alchemy in the story, with all of its symbols and transmutation circles, most of it has some kind of basis in real-world alchemy or occultism. She wants to tell a story about war? She interviewed actual veterans of World War II to better understand them. I find it incredibly admirable how well explored all of her story elements are. So this brings me back to the main question: which series is better, Fullmetal Alchemist or Hunter x Hunter? And it all really depends on what you value in a story. The unrestrained creativity of Hunter x Hunter allows Togashi to let his mind run wild. He does whatever he wants, and it makes for a fantastical series that is a joy to read. That being said, being unrestrained isn't always a good thing. Look, I love the Chimera Ant arc, but by that I mean I love the palace invasion section of it. There is a lot of build up to that, and honestly it varies in how interesting it is. There are just so many plot lines happening because Togashi isn't really putting a lid on what he does with the story. So while I don't think there's any part of the story that is badly written, it definitely has times where it's very tedious because it can focus on a plot point that you just aren't as invested in. I mean, just look look at the current state of the manga, you can go from a chapter of Kurapika explaining Nen for the 20th time to one of the most insane and engaging chapters in the entire series. In contrast, Fullmetal Alchemist plays it very safe, but executes everything very well. You'll never see any of the insanely unique concepts that are rife in Hunter x Hunter, and it never really showed me everything it presented. There's whole other countries in this world that Arakawa built that are nothing more than shapes on a map to me. And in hindsight, that is kind of frustrating, but at the same time, it delves into everything else so effectively and efficiently that it honestly blows me away. Nothing about the story feels like it wasn't planned out ahead of time. Everything is just so well structured and made. I love both of these series dearly for very different reasons. I get why these two series are so highly regarded, because they both capture fundamentally different styles of writing so perfectly and so well written, to the point where comparing them is a matter of personal taste. For me, I like Fullmetal Alchemist more. I highly value that sense of efficiency that the story has. But again, be sure to let me know which one you like more. I'd love to know what reasons you have to love these stories. Also be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video. You can even become a member like these fantastic fellas right here. And in the meantime, take care and have a good one.